I was out for a walk in my neighborhood and I saw this lovely evening scene and the light was hitting the side of this house. And that's the reason I stopped and took this photo. And today I'm going to tell you how I'm able to paint the light and make the light feel believable within this scene. Here you can see it on the figure, a light side, a shadow side of the figure in a similar color, light side of the chimney, shadow side. And your painting has a nice richness and complexity to it when you can pair those values, those light values and those middle values. So if you've ever struggled to capture that feeling of light and recreate that feeling within your paintings, then today's video is for you. So I've laid out a simple drawing, and before I wet down the front and back of my paper, I like to run a kneaded eraser over the drawing just to prevent smearing the drawing on my paper. So after I do that, I wet down the front and back of my paper, and we are into the first wash of this painting. The first wash is absolutely crucial for creating the light. The first thing I'm painting here is the light on the side of the house, and I like to lay that in first because I know that that's the brightest part of this scene, and everything else around the scene is going to be darker than this. Painting the light all comes down to the values in your painting, how light and how dark areas are, and we cannot have light if we don't paint dark. So even from this very early stage of the painting, I know that everywhere else in the scene needs to be darker than this bright area of the house. So right away I'm thinking about values. So I'm laying in a light sky and the warm tone on the side of the house. And when it comes to painting light, you want to ensure that your sky is dark enough. You don't want to go too light in the sky because you want that light to really feel strong on the house. You need to push the value of the sky in order to have those values read correctly. I'm laying in some soft color for the trees, all the light values. That's what we're painting in this first wash. And now I'm pushing the value here, and I'm thinking about the color that is going to be under the grass. So I know this isn't the final value for this, and I'm going to paint over this again, but what is the color that we're going to leave behind? In watercolor, we really are painting in reverse from light to dark. In each phase of the painting, we need to have a clear idea of what it is that we are going to paint around and leave behind in the next phase of the painting. Now you can see there's a little bit of tone on the top part of this house. I'm dropping that in now while it's still wet. The paper is not just soaking wet, it's damp. And so I'm able to lay in this little bit of value while the paper is still damp. For one thing, I'm not using a large brush that holds a lot of water and paint. I don't want to wash just flowing down the paper. I'm using less water and more paint when I'm going back in and the paper is damp. I added in the red for this figure's shirt, a little bit of skin tone, a little bit of color for the figure's pants, and a little more value on some of the trees. And here's what the paper looks like once it has dried. Now we're ready to move in to the middle value phase of the painting. I wanted to really simplify the background of this painting. If you look at the reference photo, there are a lot of trees in the background, and I don't want to create all that texture in the distance because I want to maintain a feeling of depth. So in order to create those soft edges, after the painting has already dried, I'm taking this brush with some nice clean water and I'm re-wetting the paper around the house and into the sky. This is going to allow me to have some softer edges in the background, even though the painting is already dry. So I'm laying in the background of the trees. And in this phase of painting, you really want to ensure that you're not painting too light. Remember, we really want that feeling of vibrant light on the face of this house. And in order to get there, we need to paint really strong and bold in our middle values and in our darks. So I'm connecting the roof of the house right into the background, and I'll create those separations later, but as for now, I can paint that in a very connected way. And I'm moving right down into the value of the grass. Remember, we laid in the value of that path, the driveway here, in our first wash, and in order to have that hard edge, I can come back in and paint the grass in the second wash. And I'm connecting the shadow side of the house right into the wash of the grass. I'm really seeing that middle value as one large connected shape. For the shadows that are on the front of the house, I once again am using a brush with clean water, and I've re-wet part of that because I want some of these edges to be soft. I like to mix up soft and hard edges. You'll notice I'm holding the brush further back here, and I'm trying to really create an impression, some loose brush marks of the shadows that are cast across the face of the house. And so I'm laying in those marks for the shadows here and connecting the shadow and the grass all together into the value of the car in the background. Now I'm bringing forward some of those shadows. Now I'm adding this second wash to our grass. I want that feeling of light on the grass and a bit of texture, especially closer up to us. I wanted a little more texture. And back here, there's less texture. So that's a good way to create a feeling of depth as well. Texture brings things forward. Lack of texture pushes things back. So this part of the grass here that's closer to us, I wanted to give it some more texture. So I'm doing some faster brush work, some sweeping marks to leave some of these brighter areas behind. But I also like how this texture is now going to define this area of the driveway as well. So now I have the texture of the grass, and I'm moving down into here, adding a little bit more value, defining the edge of the road a little bit with these marks. So you can see getting the middle values on top of the light values. We're starting to see the light in the painting become more apparent. Now I'm moving in to some darks, and this is really when the light becomes vibrant. We have a complete range of values from light, middle, all the way to dark. I'm getting the final value on the roof of the house, how that's really going to pull that house forward and let that background feel more like a background and get pushed further back. So shadow side, I painted the shadow side of the chimney, and that's a really helpful way to think of painting too when you're creating light, is the light side and the shadow side. And we lay the light side in on the first wash and the shadow side in the middle values and the dark phases. And when you get that range of values, here you can see it on the figure, a light side, a shadow side of the figure in a similar color, light side of the chimney, shadow side. Your light really starts to become believable, and your painting has a nice richness and complexity to it when you can pair those values, those light values and those middle values. Need a little more value on the shadow side of the house. And again, I'm leaving little parts behind on every phase of the painting. So that little bit there was painted in the middle value wash. I'm leaving a little bit of hint of light on that part of the house that I painted in the middle value wash, knowing what to leave behind in every wash and painting that little area in the previous wash. When you can start to think that way and plan ahead, you'll take a big step forward in your paintings. And we are into some of the darks and details. The middle value shape is really finding connections. The darks and details are creating the little bits of separation, the little bits of definition. And I want to show you something else here on the tree. Thinking through light, middle, dark, all within this tree, create a nice light effect. There's just a subtle difference in value between the light and middle. And then when we come in with some of these defining darks, just hinting at it, it really comes to life. The darks are really the payoff stage of the painting. You've done the hard work of the drawing, the lights and middle values, and it's really fun. Probably the most enjoyable part of the painting is when you get to see all your hard work pay off, and that happens in this last stage of the painting. A few darks to give the house some detail and push that light even more. Added in a nice leading line from the edge of the road here that gets us into the scene. You know, there's nothing magical about this composition, but when I can find lines, directional lines that bring our eye through the painting, I always try to do that. This nice little Z, your eye can start here, move over to here, follow the path up to the house. The tree leads the eye back over to here. You see the figure. Just moving the eye of the viewer through the scene is important. And I used a little bit of gouache to add the hat onto this figure. And that's a nice way to separate the figure from the background, to bring the figure forward a little bit, and it also makes the light stand out more when I can have a nice little highlight. And we're nearing the end of the painting. A lot of this is just detailed brushwork. I felt like the light on the path wasn't strong enough, so I go ahead and I glaze over that, and that means the painting is dry, and now I'm painting another wash over the top of it to give it a little stronger value. I like to use a bigger brush. I don't want to load up a smaller brush and just have to use 100 brush strokes to cover this area. So using the right size brush is always helpful. And now I'm using a rigger brush, adding a few more bits of branches. And once again, You get that detail here in the middle ground, that background is really feeling like a background. It can be a little unsettling to paint this large mass, undescribed shape, but you have to trust that when you get the details and the darks into the scene and you get to the end of the painting, that it's going to read the way that it should. So painting in this way, especially in watercolor and painting in reverse from light to dark, we really have to trust the process and you really have to stick with it. It's really tempting to judge your painting throughout every stage of the process, but I really suggest that you hold off judgment on your painting until you get to the end, until you get the darks into the scene. Because you don't know if your light is believable, if the scene is really working, until that stage of the painting. And here is a look at the final painting. It's not some great masterpiece, but I do feel like I was able to capture the light and the feeling, and I'm pretty happy with it. And if you can think through your painting from the beginning to the end and have a plan for what needs to happen in each phase, and trusting that process, really trusting that the darks are going to bring the scene together and make that light feel vibrant, you will be more likely and more able to capture the light in any scene that you are wanting to take on. Have you ever been really excited about a painting and you get all set up, you find that right reference that you're excited about, and then it's time to go and you feel lost? You just are having a hard time finding consistency. Some of your paintings turn out, some of your paintings don't turn out, and you're not really sure why. Well, I have a free resource that I want to give to you today that can help with these problems. My 5 steps to plan a successful watercolor painting. I walk you through the crucial planning phase of your painting that will help you understand what you're going to paint first, second, and third. The planning is really so important, especially in watercolor. This medium is harder to correct. It's so immediate. So having that plan is very important. I send you a PDF that you can download. And the great thing about this is you can have it on your phone, you could print it out, and you can take a look at these crucial planning steps before you start each painting to ensure that you're thinking through these important things as you get started. You can download this right now before you start your next painting. All you have to do is follow this link here and download my 5-step guide to planning a successful watercolor painting.